Well, I was very encouraged by the results, especially the small number of seldoms and nevers for people not looking at the news. And I wonder if, because you think of college students as very burrowed into what they're doing and maybe not looking up so much. I know that was that way when I was in college, and I think that the ubiquity of online resources, everyone having cell phones and stuff like that, might be contributing to that. Because 20, 30 years ago, when you were in college, you actively had to subscribe to a newspaper. You actively had to go to the student lounge and look at the television in order to get news. And everyone has news in their pocket right now. And so I think that that maybe online isn't such a bad thing after all us print people. If people are able to get their news much more easily than they used to, whatever kind of life situation they're in.
I guess what really stood out to me was just the definition of news and how it's becoming more and more ill-defined, which I just find very interesting. I mean, when I was in college, I always understood news to mean very important events. But looking at the study today, there were all sorts of words I normally wouldn't associate with news. That's how students define news, which I think is fascinating, because I think accuracy is something that's really big with having so much access to information, and then how do students kind of differentiate between what's true and what's not, and therefore what's news and what isn't. There was a study about a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, about who do students trust, or who do people trust as their main news anchor. And a lot of people, I was expecting to hear Brian Williams or David Muir, and people said Jon Stewart. So I'm just surprised that Comedy Central isn't more prominent in your study as well, because a lot of students get their news from Comedy Central.
A couple things I was really not surprised to see the number of students responding that they're getting most of their news from their devices, especially the smartphones. I was surprised to see actually so many mention print, because I didn't know there was print really much anymore. And I'm assuming that they mean things like the Phoenix and maybe catching the Sun-Times or Red Eye at the CTA stations and things like that. I was disappointed but not surprised to see radio so low, because it's just not, unless you're driving, it's not a primary vehicle for delivering news, I think, for a lot of people.
Probably the biggest surprise was in the choices of news organizations or news services that students indicated. All of the top 10 or so are fairly traditional news organizations, and I guess I betray my bias when I say I think that's a healthy thing. These are organizations that, while they may not always succeed at it, they at least profess to engage in the discipline of verification, which is the essence of journalism. And so that is, if not a guarantee, then provides good odds that the information the reader or hearer or viewer receives is going to be accurate.